So I'm back, a little bit more interesting as this has progressed. This video is going to be about the phone call. It might be a little shorter one, and then I'm going to jump into the next one. So after I got the goodnight message from Becky, I ended up calling the next day. It was two different conversations combined in one. So I asked her, hey, there's, Grays and Thomas coming up matching that I have a half nephew. She goes, pretty much, well, I need to talk to your dad. It's going to change everything, and I need to talk to your sisters. So meantime, I'm still thinking, because she said Cliff first, that, hey, so, it's what I thought. You know what I mean? It's like maybe he did dip out, you know what I mean, after, working away 40 years, long time working away and only coming home, as a man, him seeing his wife, a few hours a week and then going back. Couldn't have been easy. Okay. So, because at the same time, again, the hits I was getting, it was from the same area Cliff was from. The unique aspect of the one town's name that hit was the same name of the university my parents went to. So I'm still thinking, where I'm about to find out, Cliff out there, was a Rolling Stone. You know what I mean? So she is not giving me information. So phone conversation ends really quick, and she's like, call back at 7. And I'm like, yeah, I'm not calling back at 7. I end up having to do something, called her back, and then my sisters happened to be there. So then I hit record on the phone call, just so I had, to make sure anything wasn't changed, what was said. So I'm very, at this point, I'm intrigued this entire time. There's zero anger, zero anything. At this point, I'm just like, I just want to know what is going on. Still, without that full knowledge of anything's going on, I'm searching multiple different Grays coming up all over the place, that are hit on all these different families. So I'm like, all right, it could be this person, this could be this person. My daughter was interested in this, so she's helping me sending me this type of stuff. It was kind of cool. She's at college, and we're searching, like, oh, this kind of looks like you. It's kind of, And at that time, the information from the person who helped me on my ancestry, from my heritage DNA, I didn't have the connects from her. I knew the name, but there was no real connections on there besides like maybe one or two people. So I just had a name of last name at that point. Okay. So as soon as I call, Becky goes into, I was like, I just need to know what's going on. Like I'm interested in what's going on. Obviously there's something going on. She hits it, and I'm not going to go too depth of it, but it very much as I would hope it would have been different, but as anybody would probably understand, her life is getting turned upside down at the same time. So I don't give it an excuse for her actions and how she acted, because her lie, right, just came to truth, and that's where she knew something that came out, where my whole situation changed, right? So to me, and her being a social worker, there would have been hopes to be a better response, and there wasn't. And but it's understandable. Like it's understandable that all of a sudden now, this facade is going to be pretty much turned upside down. And she goes right off the bat, Cliff was with somebody, and I'm like, okay, I'm still. And she's like, I was too. And she's like, yes, I did know a guy named such and such Gray. And I'm like, I'm like, okay, so like, I'm like, wait, hold on a second. You knew somebody with that last name? So I'm like, oh, this is just better. This is like a whole different scenario, right? A completely different scenario. So now I have a lot of people reaching out to me that know me, that are reading some of this stuff, or that's watching some of this stuff. And like, are you okay? I hope you're not mad. Like, I'll go into the explanation, right? And I have another video coming that kind of describes who I am as a person, right? Not people seeing me from the outside, but who I am as on the inside. This is going to help. So the minute that she said that, right, and I go, wait, what? And then I had to repeat it, and she repeated it, that she knew somebody with that name. I didn't even know there was a weight on me, right? And I don't think there was, because I pretty much was raised by her. Like, you understand the situation, you move past it, right? You look at it, you move past it, you understand it, right? And that was tough as a kid growing up, because it was, I'm coming home, stuff's happening, and she's always consistently, well, look at what they went through. You know what I mean? I'm like, okay. Whereas a kid, I would want her to be the loving mother, right? And from her perspective, she was, but she couldn't take that, hat off from work. Which when I went through school, it was interesting to learn, like, uh, with my first degree being in psychology, it was very much like, don't be a psychologist because you're worse in relationships. Like, you cannot take your hat off. They have a high divorce rate. Now, this is back in the mid 2000s when I was going through school. I graduated high school in '98. Didn't get my first degree till 2008 because I was working and traveling and doing different things. So in between, I had military background, so I was going different places and trying to knock out classes as I went. So that was kind of relief too. But I was, growing up, I could understand it later on, but it didn't heal the, come on, just look at it from my point of view. It's like, just be there for my, as a mom, which I don't look at it negatively, because she was trying to. She was like, and it actually helped and made me a better person when I got older. To, like, now, most situations, if somebody does something, my kids will say, people will be like, you like to stay calm in like every situation. Like, someone will do something and you're kind of like really laid back. I'm like, yeah, because I'm looking at it right from that point of view, right? Where I had a problem with that growing up, because if somebody would say something, I was reacting to the N word. Like, I had a very bad, that was almost, I guess you would say, a trigger, but it was more, I wouldn't say it was a trigger, right? It was more like I'm reacting to it. I used to think to myself, I don't want my Cliff being in this town and those kids having kids and then beating up Cliff as an old man. That was my intellectual thought process. So she says it after I repeat it again, and I instantly was like, oh. Like, and it honestly was like a quick, like, I smiled when I was on the phone, right? And I was like, because the lift off my shoulders I didn't know was there, and I don't want to use that word, but that's the only way I can describe it, was everything that poor me as a kid with Cliff, right? It was gone. Like, it was instantly gone, because this man, I have videos talking about it. I respect anybody that adopt kids. I respect people that, I've been a step parent. So that's been a little different, but people that adopt kids and have foster kids and that type of stuff, I have respect for them, but it wasn't something I'd ever wanted to do, because again, growing up in a household, we always had, like, they would joke around, call them strays. All the different kids would come and stay at our house for periods of time, and I was like, limited time with my parents anyway, and I'm like, well, why, these kids are here taking up time from us. So I had a different view. But grew to an adult that I wouldn't do that myself, but I respect that people do it. But it was the fact that this person did all these things. So the fact that he did come home and I saw him an hour a week, he didn't have to do that because I wasn't his son, right? Like, so, and it wasn't a an anger thing. It instantly was like, man, I have way more respect for him now, like way more respect for him. And like, my family knows, so I'm like kind of like a certain way anyway. So like, when that happened, I was like, right, Cliff, like, good for you. I still have my opinion about them not telling me, right? But then with Becky, right, most parents I've met, they've tried to keep this bubble, right? Especially if they're, born in the 50s and 60s and then 70s, and they live this life, right? And then it's all of a sudden, generations didn't have, their generations thought anything they did would stay hidden, right? Where we know anything we do, somebody's gonna pull out a camera, right? So everyone knows their parents at home, and everyone knows their parents when they go outside, right? So this was good for me with her, and I just laugh because I'm like, there's no way she can change this narrative. There's no way, even though she's probably going to try, that her and Cliff split up for a little bit. They got back together, and I guess they talked about it new, right? From what Cliff said too, that he knew. But the key thing was, where I have all these different things coming out, is I stressed on the conversation. Like, hey, okay, I don't care, that happened, tell me about who this person was. I don't know anything about him. I'm like, okay. Like you saw him one time, like, I'm like, what? Well, I moved in with them with your sisters. And I'm like, okay, so for like 2 or 3 months, like, how long were you with this person? And Cliff's in the background, 7 or 9 months. He knew the address where they stayed. He knew everything he knew the person's name besides the middle name was wrong. You know what I mean? It was hilarious because he's in the background. And this man had a stroke, right? 2 strokes, actually. And he's actually done very well. That boy, as soon as that stuff came out in the background, you just hear him. And it's just funny. Like, he's like, oh, I know where he's from. And he knew where he was from. All this type. And this is something that happened, 40 years ago. So Becky, the entire time, was on the defensive, right? And I'm just like trying to figure out like what's going on. So I didn't get any information, and I kept doing, you know, the calm walkthrough. Okay, so traumatic event, because it's somehow there's some type of trauma there, you know. And I'm like, okay. She's like, I just know he wasn't a good man. And I'm like, okay. So like, what do you know? Like, how did you meet him? Like, and I just wasn't getting any information. Like, it was a constant. Cliff was with somebody. I'm like, I don't care. Like, I just want to know who this man is. I wanted to start searching him because I'm not upset. This is something that's 40 years ago. So I'm interested now, right? Like, all these different things happened in my life that don't happen to other people. And this is one of those other things, right? Or unique things. This happens to other people, but like very unique things. And this is one of those things. And I'm like, just let's walk through. Wasn't getting information. And then all of a sudden, I'm like, okay, so did this person know? And she's like, well, I called him and he said he didn't want anything to do with you. And I'm like, well, okay, you know, like I don't know anything about the dude. So, you know, it's the 60s, 70s. She knew he was from Germany. She knew his mom was a pastor, and like, so I'm like, okay, so you don't know anything about him, and you were with him 3 months, and then Cliff and I 7 months, right? So I'm like, you know, even my sisters who don't really like, they're older than me 5 years. They're very much like, don't talk back to Becky, right? Still at this age, which is like, they were like, well, it is kind of makes sense that you're with somebody for a long time. You don't have any information about him. And she's like, you know something? She's like, you want me to tell you? And then Cliff goes, I'll tell him. I heard that he did this, and he was a pimp. And I'm like, and she's like, yes, that's what I heard too. I'm not going to say that, but that is what somebody said one time. And I'm like, so I'm laughing. I'm like, okay, so he's a pimp, but you moved in with him with my two sisters when they were little and took you in? Now, everybody knows who that person is if he is a pimp, what that woman is that he lets live with him, right? So I'm dying laughing, right? Like, so I'm like, okay. I'm like, okay, hey, you know, shoot, my daddy a pimp, you know what I mean? Like, so I'm, because it's hysterical to me because I know nothing she's saying is true, right? But it was just funny that, like, every time she would kind of say something negative, she'd take it back right away. And it wasn't negative, like, well, I heard he got in trouble and he was here and there, and I'm like, okay, I knew he was in Germany, and he came back for a period of time. And I knew his mother was a pastor. That's all I got from the conversation. And he was a pimp. So I'm sitting, but he was a correction officer too, as he was pimping, right? So like, it was just this, and they only said pimp once, but because of all I think about right away is Dave Chappelle, his whole episodes, right? And I think of a pimp named Slickback, right? I'm sitting there, hung up the phone, just laughing. I was like, this would be hilarious if this is true, right? But the fact that they had no information, and she was with him for 9 months, right, or 7 months, and that's what they did tell me that she was with him for 7 months. They split up. She left. She went back to. Her and Cliff got in contact again, and then they decided to, no matter what, that they were gonna raise me, but they called him first supposedly. And that's the story I'm leaving with. So I'm leaving with, he knows doesn't have anything to do with me. He was a correctional officer, and he was a pimp, right? So, and she lived with him, right, with my two sisters. So, I'm excited, right? So I'm like, shoot, I'm like, this is gonna be some interesting stuff to find out. But in the reality is, I knew if he's in Germany and he comes here, he's a Vietnam vet, right? A lot of black men I told before back then would stay over in Germany because they didn't feel comfortable coming back. And then I heard that she said, I think he went back over or something. I'm like, okay, so she clearly had talked to him, because now Becky has not traveled from when I was 2. I vividly remember driving down the time we stopped about 20 miles away. She couldn't go because she had a panic attack. So I'm like, well, probably because I'm born and they know what's happening, and they were in Frederick during this whole time. So if somebody sees her and sees me, you know, the truth might come. But that's like a hindsight thought process of mine. So this video is a little bit longer. The next video, very, very good. I'm about to see, you know, and I already know, so it makes it even funnier, right? So you're living this with me, and I'm just telling the stories like a week back, and so we're about to, you know, find out if my daddy is a.
I'm a pimp named Slickbacks.